Hello everyone, welcome back. So we are in discussion of the Kubernetes in depth, right? So as a part of that, in last video, what we have seen is we have seen the Kubernetes architecture, how it works, what is the key component of the Kubernetes, what are the roles of those component, right? All these we have discussed. What is Kube API server, etcd, controller manager, scheduler, and the other thing on the worker node, like we have the kubelet, we have the container runtime engine, and we have the pod where the final application will gonna run, right? So what I have done is I have updated our nodes to further. Let me go back to this. So this is the same repository which I am using, right? So what I have done is I have just put some one-liner or maybe little bit more details about all those component, right? Which is not covered or maybe which is I thought just helpful to you. So etcd is nothing. Etcd is just a key value data store, right? And if you want to more about the etcd, right? Because etcd is a component which you, not etcd, maybe the other as well, you can deploy it as a dedicated service, right? If you want, you can explore this file etcd explore etcd. Here you can see that what I am doing is I am just downloading a binary file, right? Like a complete standalone etcd. Okay, the spelling is mistake, I will correct it. But anyways, you can download this binary, you can do this stuff from your end, right? And then you can try to run all these command with the etcd controller, which is the client to this etcd binary itself, right? So this thing we can do. And apart from that, if you want to explore more on the KubeADM, because there are two things, right? One is the standalone etcd you can do, right? But we are not using a standalone etcd. Maybe in some video I will show you how to set up a etcd standalone to that KubeADM server as well. As a service you can manage it, right? But we are using it as a KubeADM installation, right? So in the cluster, what is happening is KubeADM itself is deploying etcd as a pod in the kube system namespace, right? And if you want to see all this stuff, so you can probably with this help command you can just go and check all this detail. Next we have seen the kube API server, which is nothing, which is just the first entry to the cluster, right? Using kubectl command you are interacting with your cluster, what you are doing, right? Similarly, for the Kube API server, if we want to see it as a KubeADM port setup, so for this, a definition file sitting under etc Kubernetes manifest Kube API server YAML. And if you want to deploy it as a dedicated service, then obviously that the service file will be located under the systemd system directory. Next, we have discussed the scheduler. So scheduler is again, it is just uh, to schedule your nodes ports on that particular nodes, right? Which fits a correct requirement of that particular thing, right? Then we have seen the controller manager. So controller manager again itself it is something that which will continuously monitoring your other nodes, the health check, everything, right? So it was thing which we have already discussed, like how it is being monitored, what is the time it is taking to grace period and everything. Then we have seen the kubelet. So kubelet is nothing. Kubelet is just the kind of agent which will gonna run on the worker node and directly connected to the API server, which will give you the state of your pods, how many pods are running, what are the states, what are the state of the node. Everything will be gonna transfer via kubelet to the API server. Kube proxy is something that within the cluster, right? It is a kind of the internal network has been set up across all worker node and the master node. So kube proxy will help to all this help, right? So today we will see uh, pod and replica set, right? So pod, I think we have already discussed. It is the small object in the entire Kubernetes cluster, right? It is nothing. It is just a wrapper of your container, right? And a one pod can run one or more container at a time. Maybe we'll see the use case of that where we'll gonna the more than one container, but 99% I have seen that it is a dedicated container only in the like one container, one port, right? That is the one-to-one combination or the connection I have seen. But there are use cases where if you want to run some kind of help container or maybe the sidecar container they call it as a maybe purpose of the monitoring or the logging purpose, right? You can run that obviously. So that is the thing. And the replica set is nothing as the name state replica, right? Replica is like if you want to maintain or if you want to run a copy of your current pod, right? Current application you are running and you are maintaining to high load, right? So that it can be balanced between your application due to some performance issue or something. That can be managed by the replica set, okay? Because it is maintain the number of the desired pods, right? So you can create a definition file for the replica file .yaml and you can simply do it the kubectl create f command, right? Don't worry, we will discuss all these in details. Replica set, right? If you want to scale, right? So there are two ways, right? One is something that whatever the definition file you have created, that file, what you can do is you can simply edit that file, update the replica count and replace with this, right? So it will gonna replace that particular replica, whatever that. If you, let's say it was running 5 replica earlier and now you're making it 8, right? So what it will do, it will deploy 3 more. And earlier if it was running 5 and now you are making it to 2, so what it will do, it will just terminate the 3 pods and keep only 2 as a running, right? Or maybe directly you can do from the command line kubectl scale command and the number of replicas and whatever that you are replica set, either you can give the replica set or you can give the definition file. So that is something that you can do, right? There is one note I have mentioned here: replica set can manage the all ports which has the label as app nginx app, whether or not these ports are created before the replica set or created. Yeah, this is something because whatever the file I gonna explain you about this, right? So there we have a put label as a nginx app, right? So maybe I will explain you what is that, or if not, then maybe I will update this line here, right? So this we have already seen, right? So this is my master node. Here you can see both control plane and worker node is ready, right? And we have seen that we have something called, if I go to the cube system, so here you can see these are the services, right? The key component is already running, right? And as a part of this, if you want to see, so this is the definition file for all these key component, the etcd, kube API server, kube controller, and the kube scheduler, right? So using these YAML file, right, whenever you are starting your server or maybe the pod, whenever you restart or by XYZ reason, if it is automatically restarted, so how it will come to know? This will come to know from here, right? Like what I need to deploy, what is my advertisement IP, where my API server is running, where is my etcd is running, what is the port, and everything will be gonna pick from these YAML file, right? So before I run this, right, so what I am gonna do is under cheat sheet, if you go to that kubectl command, right, so here I have put some more command just to understand, right? Like if you just to run this command, so what it will do, it is just to run a sample nginx pod, which we have already seen in the last video, right? To list the pod, you can go to the get pod. To describe, like to check more details on that pod, what image it is using, where it is gonna deployed, what is the target pod, port, or maybe the image on which node it is running. Every further detail will be shown with the describe command. If you want to check more about the port in the one liner, right, like on which node it is running, what is the IP assigned to that particular port, then you can use this -o void. If you want to delete the port, then obviously kubectl delete and the resource name, resource type, and the resource name. So here I am deleting the port, right? Similarly, if you want to delete a service, right? So kubectl service, kubectl delete service and the service name, right? So it is simple. Kubectl operation, whatever you are running, the get, delete, run, then the type of the resource and the resource of the name, right? Resource name. Then it is something else if you want to create a YAML file, right? So probably this I will not take it now, but this is a good command and it will help you in the exam as well, right? If you don't want to spend your much time to write a YAML file, right? So this is simple that you can just, and it will automatically gonna create a YAML file for you, right? Then using the YAML file, how you can deploy. So it is a kubectl create. Earlier it was run, right? Because here I'm just directly running. There is no mentioned definition file. There is no desired state, right? But here I'm completely saying that, okay, this is my requirement, right, in the definition file and go and create that particular resource. If you want to edit, then obviously kubectl edit and the resource name. If you want to explain about, okay, if you want to explain about more on this, right, any of the deployment, let's say kubectl explain replica set, it will give you the more detail about that, okay, what it is doing. And if I'll go to the my master node, and if I'm gonna run this, so it will give you the more detail, right, what it is doing. It is these are the fields you can use in the definition file, right? So this is how that it will help you more on this part. Then we have the replica set, which we have already seen, right? So now let's try one thing. What I have done is I have these lab, right? And under I have created some files, the YAML file, which we will discuss, right? I will keep on updating the files here as we go ahead, right? But what you can do is, let me do one thing. Just go to the repository, because this repository URL is already embedded with the description of the previous video. And I'm gonna do that with this current video as well, right? So I'm gonna clone this repo. It will just take 1 minute. Yeah, it is done. Let's clear. Go to CKA lab. And here you can see I have these commands, right? So let's start with the, because we will follow this numbering pattern, right? So that will not get confused what is covered and what is not covered, right? So we'll start from the number one. So here you can see what it is doing is it is creating a container with the kubectl command, right? And expose it as a service, right? So as of now, service we will discuss in very detail, right? But as of now, just try to understand is service is something that using that service, what you can do is you can uh, access your application outside of the cluster, right? That service will help you, right? Because whatever you have created, or you're gonna create the pod, or maybe the replica set, or maybe the deployment, right? It never gonna expose by default, right? Because it will be something that if a requirement, then you need to expose it to outside world, right? If not, obviously you don't need to expose it to anywhere, right? You can just directly go and connect it inside your cluster, right? But that's not the purpose. At the end, we need to serve our client, right? Whatever the application we are running, we want that user will come to our application and they will do their part, right? And that will be possible only and only using the service, right? We have different services type, which we will discuss in this service video, right? But not now. But as of now, just one liner understand, if you want to uh, access your application outside of your cluster, right, then you need to expose it as a service. So I have, this is my Docker Hub, right? So I strongly recommend, if you don't have Docker Hub, then go and create a Docker Hub account, right? This is something that today only I have pushed this image, right? But you can see that I have a lot of which I'm using so many years. Anyways, let's come back to our master node. So here, what I'm doing is I am gonna run this command. So let me explain what this command does, and then I will suit it. So what I'm saying is here, kubectl run a container called web1, right? And while you are running a web1 pod, not container, obviously at backend it will gonna create a container, but in Kubernetes world we call it as a pod. Okay, kubectl create a pod called web1, and you need to use this image, right? So this image is sitting on this Docker Hub registry, and this is the name of that. If you are not specifying any of the tag, right? Tag is nothing. Tag is just a kind of label, or you can understand the version of your image, right? We will see in this when we discuss about the rolling update strategies. Okay. So what I'm saying is run a web1 pod on this image using this image, and it will gonna use a port 80 inside of the container, right? Let's quickly run. And if I want to see is, so -w is something that live you can see your port is happening. As of now, it is already running, right? Because it was very fast already. Or maybe it is just pulled that image and spin up that image. You can see the 6 second ago. But if it is taking time to pull, so it will say container creating, activating, and starting and running, then this is the state it will gonna show you, right? So again, if I'll show, So this is the pod I am running, right? If I'll just show hyphen o wide, right? So you can see it is running on a Kubernetes node 1 container, and this is the IP assigned to my pod. If I'll try to run this, what do you think? It will gonna connect? Yes, obviously, because that is something that internally we are using, right? But this IP will not be exposed from the outside, right? Because that's what I am saying is on this IP internally on port 80, I have something running, right? So you can see that it is responding that welcome to Path for Cloud. I am running on host web 1. This is the web 1, right? And my IP is this one, right? But this how I gonna expose this to outside world? I want to access this web page from my system web browser, right? So for that, I have told you that we need to expose this, right? So let me copy this command, and what it is doing is it is just doing nothing. It is exposing a port called web1. This is the service type node port. Node port, as of now, you just understand node port is something. I am exposing this port, right, on port 8080, on port 8080 using my node IP address. Okay, let's suit it. It is exposed, and if you want to see, you can see. So here you can see this is the pod IP, right? This is the service IP. If you want to see, let me show you first, and then I will explain how exactly it is connecting. Okay, so kubectl describe svc web1. So here you can see, right? This is the service, right? Because this is the service across all cluster, right? Whatever the nodes we are using. And at the back end, it is gonna connect to this endpoint. If I scroll up, so you can see this is the IP of my pod, right? So you can see it is connecting on this port IP and on this port, right? So that's how that this is running. But now the question is how I am gonna connect this from my system browser, right? So before that, let me go to Notepad. Okay, so this is the Notepad. So what is happening is this is your node. Okay, this is your service and this is your port. Okay, let's say you have this IP 192.168.0.10 or 19, whatever, right? And the service IP is something 10.103.227.254. Okay, and the port IP is 10.44.0.1. Let me take the real IP and then it will be good to understand. Okay, come on. So I have the IP this assigned to this my machine 224.27, right? And let me clear the screen and let me list the service again. This part we need to understand, right? This is very important to understand, guys. Otherwise, we'll not be able to understand the service part. So see, with the node port, because this is the service type if I talk about. So what is this? It is node port type. So node port is happening. What is happening here is we have this IP which is assigned to my node. Fine. This is the service IP which is exposed internally in my cluster, and this is the IP which is assigned to pod. Because we cannot guarantee that the pod will always up and running, right? It might die due to some XYZ reason. Then this pod will get a new IP, right? Then how come the connectivity will be there after the pod itself is, I will show you in the replica as well, right? So what is happening is this service, right? This service will gonna take this part as its own responsibility, and whenever the pod is gonna updated or maybe restarted or maybe created new or maybe terminated or maybe restarted, whatever, right? That obviously the IP got changed, right? And then the endpoint of that particular service, so that makes sure that okay, I will always connect to that pod only. And how that will happening is that will happening using this something called labels, right? So that part also we'll have in our pipeline, which we will discuss in detail. But that is something as of now just to understand. So what I'm trying to do is, this is the IP, right? So if I'm gonna hit this IP, right? If I'm gonna hit this IP, this will take to me on this, where my service is exposed on this port, right? Now the service is connected to this endpoint on port 80. So at the end where I'm reaching is, I'm reaching from here to the port, the exact application where I'm running, right? Let me elaborate one more time. This is the node port, because node port is something we have this range. It's starting from 30,000 to 32,600, 767, right? So this is the range. Automatically, if you are not defining somewhere in the definition file or in the command line, what Kubernetes will does, if you put as a node port as a service type, it will auto assign a free port from this range, right? So as of now, it has assigned this IP to, right? So if I am gonna connect to my node port is something the node IP, and the port is assigned to that particular thing. If I'm gonna connect to this, so it knows, because the service was exposed like this. If the traffic is coming on this, the traffic will be get forwarded to this IP on this port. And service knows what is my endpoint. Endpoint is something this, because that we have seen, right? Because if you see this, because it knows that I'm gonna connect to this, and this is, you can see that this is the IP and this is the port, right? And it will gonna connect, right? So let's see, is it really working or are we are just talking, right? So here you can see, welcome to Path for Cloud. And if you see on the master node, that's what we have defined here, right? It is running on web 1 and this is the IP 104401, right? That's how it is designed, that image, right? Because using that image I have done, right? So that is something that the most important part of this service, you need to understand how the service is done, right? So that is something that the using the uh, something called command line we have done, right? What if we need to do as a this one definition file, right? Like here you can see I have this pod.yaml file, right? But before that, let's try to understand what all these parts, right? So I'm gonna jump back to my notes, and here if you see, I have put as one file called understand YAML, right? Because here all resources, right, whatever that we are using, that is recommended to manage as a definition file, kind of YAML file, right? So that you can keep a track of control of that all this what is happening if you have changed something, or maybe might be if anyone has changed to that particular thing, how you can make sure that okay, what was the previous version, right? That is why in the real time also we manage this as a YAML file, and where we will uh, keep it as a somewhere on the, subversion system like GitHub or something, right? Anyways, so in the any YAML file, not any YAML file, but in the Kubernetes definition YAML file, we have these four main sections. One is the API version, kind, metadata, and the spec, right? So API version is nothing. API version is just which gonna refer to the resource or class where that particular resource is supported, like V1, apps V1. These are the developer class, right? So that Kubernetes knows okay to how to interact with that particular object. So that's the API version we need to specify. Kind is obviously that the resource type what we are creating, whether we are creating a pod, whether we are creating a service, deployment, replica set, all these are a kind, right? Metadata is nothing. Metadata is just a name or maybe any other label or annotation you need to. Annotation is nothing. Annotation again a kind of internal label of Kubernetes, and the label is something which we put for our understanding. And annotation is something which Kubernetes puts for internal understanding, right? Internal tracking of their resources. That's the logical thing. So metadata is nothing, it's just the additional details or the labels which we are putting on that particular, right? And the spec is the most important part, and that is something that it will not gonna be same for all resources, right? But just to start with the YAML file, I will just keep it simple, right? Spec is nothing. Spec is just a specification which you are defining, right? Because if in the command line, if you see what we have done is we are saying, right? If I'll go to that one file again, so here I'm saying run a pod called web1 using that image and run on port 80, right? So this is the specification, right? And this is something that I am defining here, right? So let's try to understand. So API version is v1, right? It is pod kind, obviously. Metadata, what I have done is I just name it as a web1, right? And I have put one label called nginx-web, right? Why? Because I need to connect, I need to link my service to that particular pod, right? Because might be there are hundreds of pods are already running, right? How the service will come to know, okay, which pod I need to expose, right? So that is the most important part, that label, right? So using that label only, we are connecting that particular service to a respective pod. Okay, then we have the specification using the containers, right? Because we have that multiple container you can run. That is where you can see it is a list, right? So I'm starting with the name. I'm calling it a web1. Use this image, right? And run that application on this container port. And it is also array, right? You can see, right? So similarly, if I do this again, Kubernetes, this time I'm gonna run the kubectl create command, and I am gonna this, okay, web one is already exist because we have uh, created using this command line, right? So let me delete this kubectl. So here you can see kubectl and the name of the operation. I am performing a delete operation on which resource? I am doing it on a pod resource. And what is the name of that resource? This one, right? So it is deleted, it's gone. So now it is created a web2, right? So now if I do pod, so here you can see it is running, and it is running a same IP because that IP is got free now, right? And similarly, if I need to expose it using this service file, so service file also you can see, let me explain here because due to the window size, it is not coming good. So here you can see app again v1, earlier it was pod, but this time I'm gonna deploy a service, right? This is the name of my service. Selector, if you see, let me take it here. Let me clear it, and I'm gonna cat the second one. So here you can see it is a nginx web, right? Now service knows, okay, which label I need to select. This is the selector, right? Like wherever the pod is running with the label called app equal to nginx web, right? I need to expose that particular pod, right? That is why this, because in the service, these are the three main sections. One is the selector. Obviously, without selector, service will never know what I need to expose, right? Then the ports, which port I need to expose. It is a protocol you can mention. Port is 8080. That is something in the service port, right? And this is the only mandatory field, right? If you don't put this target port, right? So service automatically assumes, okay, this is something that I need to expose on this, right? But better to this. And if you want, if you have a such specific node port uh, kind of thing, right? If you want that, okay, this is something that I need to assign as a node port, then you can mention. Otherwise, it will automatically assign. And obviously, the type which I need to, what kind of service type I need. This is a node port, right? So this is how that looks. Now again, if I want to do it, kubectl create -f 03 service exposed, and if you see get svc, this time you can see web1 service is exposed on this port, right? If I'll go back to my this and I'm changing this, because if you do this, right, it is not there, right? Why? Let me show you. Kubectl describe web1 svc, because we need to define. Here you can see there is no endpoint, right? So this don't know how, where I need to forward the traffic. That is why this is not reaching, right? But whereas if you see the web1 hyphen service, right, it knows I need to define, I need to forward here, right? So let's take this node port now and put it here and hit enter. You can see that it is again connecting to that particular thing, right? So that is how that this is happening, right? So we have discussed the pod, how you can define. We have discussed this one, right? So in the next video, I will gonna show you what is replica set, right? So far, just try to consume all these things, whatever we have discussed. Try to clone this repo locally and make sure that you will gonna do this stuff with me. All right. So I will take a pause from today and we'll meet you in the next video. And if you like my content, then please, I would recommend to subscribe and support me. And that's it from the day. Thank you.